Vanakkam Dohadeva. Welcome everyone. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And we'll share the screen. Okay, that's interesting. Showing my calculator. There it is, first topic. Okay, we are looking at first topic here. Our first topic, we're going to look more deeply at the character quality of acceptance. It seemed to resonate well with a number of participants last weekend. So we're not going to repeat what we did. We're going to develop it into a greater depth. And definitely, you might want to take some notes. We're going to go through different examples, and one or more of them may strike a chord, as they say, and seem like something you should write down. I don't anticipate everyone would write everything down, but the ones that seem to really strike a chord with you at the moment. So we have your digital or paper writing situation. We'll repeat the definition. Acceptance is an openness to outcomes that are not what we would prefer. I cultivate it by being aware of others' preferences and being realistic as to possible outcomes. Opposite is non-acceptance. So, to broaden our understanding of acceptance, we will look at 6 different applications of this character quality. The first application is what outcomes you had hoped for you. We have 3 examples. So the question, we're going to ask you the question before we look at these 6 different ways of applying acceptance. Identify one or more perspectives on acceptance that apply to what outcomes you had hoped for you. So if you want something to happen for you, and it doesn't, what are some of the perspectives, one or more, that help you accept that fact? And these are the 3 examples from the workbook. In a family discussion on where to go for dinner, you willingly work past your own preference to find the group's choice. Insist that yours is the best restaurant no matter what others say. So of course, we've solved this by being aware of others' preferences and taking those into account. Second example, in applying to university and being rejected by your first 2 choices, you quickly adjust and commit to doing well at your 3rd choice. Sulk for years, resenting the university's obviously flawed decision. That's well written. So again, this is solved by being realistic to possible outcomes. Third example, when your family relocates from California to Texas, you See fresh opportunities and start making new friends in the Lone Star State. Stubbornly cling to the past, constantly calling your old friends back in California. And this is solved by being realistic to possible outcomes. So that's really just a review of what's in the character building workbook, but I thought it's worthwhile in terms of we're focusing more on how we're solving it, which we didn't do last time. Oh, this is all new material starting here. What outcomes you had hoped for others. That's the second application. So again, we'll start with the question. Identify one perspective on acceptance that applies to what outcomes you had hoped for others. An athletic father had hoped his son would excel at sports. However, the son has no interest in sports. Solved by accepting the other person as he or she actually is and not wishing them to be different. A wife is frustrated that her husband generally prefers silence to having conversations. Again, solved by accepting the other person as he or she actually is and not wishing them to be different. The third application is handling highly challenging situations. Identify one perspective on acceptance that applies to handling highly challenging situations. You are unexpectedly let go from your job, and therefore view finding a new job as a huge problem, or you view finding a new job simply as the next thing to do. Former business partner sues you for a large sum of money. Hope that hasn't happened to someone. View handling the lawsuit as a huge problem. View handling the lawsuit simply as the next thing to do. So just giving away the answer there, of course. Labeling a situation as a problem or huge problem can make it more difficult to face it. You want to put off solving it by ignoring that it exists. You want to procrastinate. When it is just the next thing to do, you simply handle it. Some next things to do are easy and others are difficult. So that's my suggestion. Challenging or super challenging situation is just the next thing to do. Don't want to label it a problem. Fourth application is clashes and fighting between social groups and nations. Identify one perspective on acceptance that applies to clashes and fighting between social groups and nations. That's a question to you. Clashes and fighting between social groups and nations, for example, racial discrimination in the United States, civil war in Afghanistan. They can be accepted by seeing them as the result of actions set in motion in the past that have not found a resolution. they are actions created by men and not actions created by God. So sometimes I have been approached about various violent situations on the planet, and people ask me, well, how can God allow this to happen? Or how can God create this? So God didn't create it, man created it, and God allows it to happen because man has to work these differences out. Like having two siblings. When they get to a certain age, you have to let them sort things out on their own. Oh, the fifth application is natural disasters such as a major earthquake and tsunami. So identify one perspective on acceptance that applies to natural disasters. Natural disasters such as a major earthquake and tsunami, for example, 2004 earthquake in Indonesia and the tsunami it caused. A lot of damage even in Sri Lanka and India on the coast. 2011 earthquake in Japan, which really was a major problem in Japanese people. They can be accepted by seeing it as part of the way the planet Earth behaves. Earth can be a dangerous place to live, so we sometimes forget that, but it's dangerous. And when the planet's ocean plates, when they shift, you get earthquakes, and they can cause tsunamis, and it's an ongoing phenomenon. So it has nothing, again, to do with God. God didn't punish man by causing an earthquake or tsunami for bad behavior. Or we don't have to ask, how can God allow this to happen? It's, in this case, it's just the Earth's nature. I imagine living on Mars, there's some movies about being on Mars that looks even more treacherous than the Earth. Sixth application is loss of a family member or a close friend. So one perspective on acceptance that applies to loss of a family member or a close friend is the question for you. This can be accepted by seeing it as the person's karma. That's the Hindu point of view. And the second point is also a Hindu point of view. Second perspective is that everyone is not destined to live a long life. For example, Swami Vivekananda was 39 when he attained Mahasamadhi. So he certainly accomplished a huge amount in his lifetime, but he only lived 39 years. So even great people aren't necessarily going to live till they're 90 or 100. So we just need to accept that. There's a built-in instinctive quality that wants everyone to live to be the same age. Everyone should live to be age 80. If they don't, something's wrong. Nothing's wrong, except your understanding of life. Some people, some infants won't survive a year. You don't really read that in the newspapers, but if that's happened to you or a friend, then you're very aware of it. Well, they weren't supposed to. It's their karma. Or some live to be 5 years old. Is that bad? No. Maybe they got everything they needed from life, from a very loving family, and now they're able to do something even greater in their next life. But they needed a certain experience just for 5 years. So we need to use our wisdom and not our human emotion to understand it as the person's karma, and that a short life isn't wrong or bad. That's our first section. Next, we'll look at bringing Lord Ganesha's grace into our life and then relate that to acceptance. Oh, this material is drawn from Gurudeva's book, Loving Ganesha. Seekers of truth come from many backgrounds, many religions, and have trod many paths. Having become acquainted with Lord Ganesha, they may wonder how their paths can participate in their present aspirations. What am I doing worshiping an elephant-faced god and loving it? They may wonder, what do I do now to harmonize this unfoldment with my previous upbringing? There is a way to reconcile this subconscious dilemma. Let's not pack it away in denial. As they say, let's face up to the spiritual awakening. Truth is, you have a loving friend in Ganesha who, if we may use the word, is the Pope of the Hindu religion. And you are by no means alone. 1/4 of the human race is acquainted with Ganesha. 25% of the people on this planet, 1.25 billion when Gurudeva wrote this, and that number is growing year by year. Our loving Ganesha leads his devotees deep into the oldest religion on planet Earth. There are two ways to come into Hinduism. One is to be born into the Hindu religion and be carried in your mother's arms to the temple. There to be inwardly and psychically connected to our loving God, Ganesha. So strong are those early impressions and samskars that they carry you through life. Another way is to unfold naturally to the point of being ready to formally enter Hinduism. To supplicate, to sincerely entreat the guardians of that religion to allow you to be a part of that immense and ancient tradition. You have to want to be a Hindu so strongly, so sincerely, that Lord Ganesha lifts you out of the fog of the materialistic conscious mind, establishing a connection and a relationship with you. This is a personal relationship with the deity. There is nobody in between, just you and the God, Lord Ganesha. So in some religions, the ministry stands between you and God. That's what Gurudev is making a reference to here. So in Hinduism, there's no one between us and the deity. It's like being adopted in a way. If you were an orphan or abandoned on the streets of Sao Paulo or Chennai, or on the streets of wherever there are little kids running around, you would be free. You could go through life listening to no one and exercising unrestricted free will. Free instinctive will. If you had a developed intellect, then you could exercise an intellectual will. You could do anything that you wanted to do, absolutely anything. Of course, you would find that as you attempted to fulfill your desires, you were limited, sometimes prevented, by the natural forces within and without. But you could attempt anything. If you were fortunate enough, foster parents might come along to help you. They would adopt you and take you into their home. Your new mother would begin to lovingly guide and direct your life. You are a part of their family now, and your well-being, your education, your training all now come under their will, to which you must adjust yourself and obey. They will watch over you and discipline you morning and night. They will protect you from getting into trouble with your free will. The modern concept of freedom leads to the darker chakras below the Muladhara chakra. Anguish is there. It is the same when you evolve a relationship, a personal relationship with the deity, Lord Ganesha. He will not allow you to use your free will to get into difficulties. Guiding you carefully and protecting you along your way in your natural karma through life is his concern. Someone once said, I worship Lord Shiva, I worship Lord Murugan, but I've never really gotten acquainted with Lord Ganesha. I responded, I being Gurudeva, you worship Shiva and Lord Murugan, and that is wonderful. But unless you have established a personal relationship with Lord Ganesha, your worship of any of the gods is probably more according to your own thoughts and fancy than true worship. Until you have established a rapport with Lord Ganesha, you cannot establish a relationship with other deities, including Shiva or Murugan, outside of your own limited concepts. It is Ganesha who introduces you to the millions of gods of the Hindu pantheon, no one else. That is the way it works. Yes, little by little, slowly, imperceptibly, a relationship evolves, a very personal, loving relationship between the devotee and the elephant-faced god. Psychic protection is granted. Physical protection, mental and emotional protection are all granted as boons by him. He will not allow his devotees to use their free instinctive willfulness to make more negative karma by getting into difficulties. Rather, he will guide them carefully, protecting them every moment along the way so that their natural birth karmas may be worked through and good karma created by right living. This is his main concern. Lord Ganesha loves and cares for his devotees. Once the devotee is connected to him through the awakening of the Muladhara chakra, loneliness is never experienced. Ganesha is a truly wonderful, loving God. He has an extraordinary knack for unweaving complicated situations and making them simple. He can unweave his devotees from their karma, simplifying and purifying their lives. But this only happens after they have established a personal relationship with him. Soon thereafter, changes begin to happen in their lives, and when they go through difficult times, they no longer become angry or live in fear or worry. When difficult times come, they know it is because they are being unwound from accumulated and congested difficult karmas or being turned in a new direction altogether. So that's an important point, and we'll look at it again here. In the previous slide, Gurudeva made an excellent summary of acceptance and Lord Ganesha's grace. He said, when going through difficult times, they no longer become angry or live in fear or worry. They know it is because they are being unwound from accumulated and congested difficult karmas or being turned in a new direction altogether. So that's acceptance. In other words, when we're under the influence of Lord Ganesha's grace, it's easier for us to accept that what is happening to us is our self-created karma. It's my karma to go through this. I must have done something crazy in my past lives to cause this to come to me in my present life. But even more so, or being turned in a new direction altogether, that's the idea that Lord Ganesha blocks an ill-conceived plan of action. So if you're not experiencing Ganesha's grace, if you don't have a personal relationship with him, you can feel that that shouldn't have happened and can't accept it. But if you're in the flow of Lord Ganesha's grace, you can see upon reflection how it really wasn't the wisest choice and regroup. Try again on a wiser path. So that's another way of accepting something that didn't work out. It was blocked by Lord Ganesha, and I'm glad he did so. So I just said what's on this slide. The last quote from Gurudeva, they know that at such a time they have to consciously surrender their free instinctive willfulness and not fight the divine happenings, but allow the God's divine will to guide their life. Such is the spiritual path of total surrender, known as prapatti. So prapatti is the Sanskrit word which is translated as total surrender. So we can see how acceptance based on the grace of Lord Ganesha can lead to total surrender, or prapatti. So we're going to look next a little bit more at prapatti. Prapatti is a term especially used in Vaishnavism to name a concept extremely central to virtually all Hindu schools. Saiva Bhakti is important in the development of the soul and its release into spiritual maturity. The doctrine is perhaps best expressed in the teachings of the four Samkhya Acharya saints who all shared profound and mystical love of Shiva, marked by deep humility and self-effacement, admission of sin and weakness. Total surrender in God is the only true refuge, and a relationship of lover and beloved known as bridal mysticism, in which the devotee is the bride and Shiva the bridegroom. The practice of yoga, too, is an expression of love of God in Saiva Siddhanta, as it is only with God's grace that success in meditation is achieved. Rishi Tirumular states, unless your heart melts in the sweet ecstasy of love, my Lord, my treasure trove you can never possess. It is in this concept of the need for self-effacement and total surrender, prapati, that the members of all sects merge in oneness at the fulfillment of their individual paths. Similarly, they all meet in unity at the beginning of the path with the worship of Lord Ganesha. So we have definition of prapati, throwing oneself down, bhakti, total unconditional submission to God, often coupled with the attitude of personal helpfulness, helplessness, self-effacement, and resignation. An essential attitude for a devotee to achieve the state of prapati is to think of the deity as a being of love. Sounds very simple, but some people are afraid of the deity. When they go to the temple, they're experiencing fear. Why are they experiencing fear? Well, based on false beliefs, but they're probably experiencing fear because they've done something wrong and they're afraid the deity might punish them. So that's not an attitude we want. And we'll explain the attitude we're looking for in a minute here. So we need to think of the deity as a being of love. One approach is the attitude of friends. Teenagers have many friends, but it is common to have one best friend to share the personal details of life. Having an Ishtadevata is like that. And the feeling we should have toward that divinity is the same as the feeling we have for our best friend. Well, that's a simple way of looking at love. It's the love that exists between best friends who are teenagers. Holding a singular focus helps us to draw closer and closer to that deity. Another approach to understanding the deity's compassionate nature and in the process ridding yourself of any lingering fear is to think of the god or goddess as the parent and yourself as the child. In fact, the deity is the perfect parent. Remember what the perfect parent, how the perfect parent acts? Perfect parent description. Because no matter what we do, he, she always sends us blessings and love. When we make mistakes, he never becomes angry or punishes us. The deity's love is perfect love, existing at all times, in all circumstances, for all souls. That's perfect love. Developing in closeness with the deity, we eventually discover and bask in that perfect love. Tirumandaram states, the ignorant foolishly say that love and Shiva are two, but none of them knows that love alone is Shiva. Anbe Shivam. When men know that love and Shiva are the same, love as Shiva, they ever remain. So then we compare Vaishnavism and Saivism. Oh, Vaishnavism starts with neutrality toward God. There we go. Servitude for God. Friendship with God. Parental feelings for God. And relating to God as a lover to the beloved. Saivism, there exists a parallel concept that also starts with neutrality. The next stage is called the Dasamarga, with the soul relating to God as servant to master. In the next stage, Saputra Marga, our relationship with God is as a child to his parents. Third stage, Sakamarga, God is like a friend. In the fourth stage of maturity, called Samarga, God is our dearest beloved. Both denominations emphasize the souls coming ever closer to God. So you can see it's close. Just the third and the fourth are in reverse order, but it's the same four attitudes. When not counting neutrality, the four attitudes are the same, which is good to know. Basically, the devotional practices of Saivism and the devotional practices of Vaishnavism are really, really similar. Oh, Bhakti Yoga moves the devotee closer to God through these stages, ultimately instilling an intense love of God. Common bhakti practices are Shravana, listening to the stories of God. Kirtana, singing devotional hymns and songs. Smarana, remembering the presence and name of the divine, which includes mantra repetition. Padasevana, service to the holy feet, which includes serving humanity. Archana, attending ritual worship both in the temple as well as attending or conducting worship in one's home shrine. Vandana, prostrating to the deity. Atma Nivedana, complete self-surrender. Atma Nivedana has the same meaning as prapati. So the last stage is prapati, complete self-surrender. Bhakti Yoga seeks to develop qualities that make communion possible, such as love, selflessness, and purity, leading to self-effacement and total surrender to God. It is in this idea of the need for total surrender, prapati, that the members of all sects merge in oneness. We know that we have attained prapati when we effortlessly know that everything that happens is due to the grace of God and not our own actions. There is no sense of fear in this mode of worship. So, of course, the state of prapati, total surrender, it's easy to accept everything because we're seeing it all as a divine dance. So the more bhakti we have, the more surrender we have, the easier it is to not take exception to what's happening in our life. Thank you very much.